Hey everyone, I wanted to go over a little piece of conversation I had with Zach Jackson during our talk on module federation. We actually went in depth into a technology he's using today in a Next.js application. If you look at it, it's going to be pretty crazy, and this is actually the entire reason I removed it from the other video. I think that one needs to be a little bit simpler. If you really want to get into some advanced use cases of module federation, this is going to be where you'll see it.
Let's jump over here to Next.js really quickly, and you can see, for example, I use the low-level API pretty much exclusively, so I don't even use this syntax anymore. It totally works, but there's just so much power that can be had. If you look in here, if I go to like this, for example, so this is the catch-all route for our Next.js apps. If I want no page reloads between multiple Next apps, I have a federated catch-all route in here, and then this goes through and does a whole bunch of Next things. But the main thing here is I'm able to use the low-level window container system. I don't need to know what page you're going to. I can do automatic service discovery and figure out what page you're going to, and then just run the factory and get the page. It's really nice for when you don't know what something's going to do and you don't want to statically import every possibility. You can just pass it properties and say, hey, Webpack, go and do this thing. That's where the low-level API comes in really handy, because you can build things up like this on it. The other cool thing is like how we figure out what your page is we run like a service discovery. So we know who all the remotes are, and now we can loop through all the remotes and just look and see if any of them have this page map. What it ends up doing is it builds up all the page routes that exist because they're all exposed out from all these apps. So if I like jump into this one, for example, I have all my page routes out here. So now I have a way to match them and a way to crawl through them dynamically. While you're busy getting a page, or when you go to a page that doesn't know what to do, I can turn around and go get the page route for it, but at the same time also get the routing config from each app. It's really handy when you want to like try and do more than just get the component, but if you want to do distributed logging or set up some additional logic, you can say, while they're downloading this component, I can put in additional modules that I want to load into the page as well, like Sentry's handler for whoever owns that app. It's quite handy.
Let me understand this piece here. Are you saying you're pulling in other applications or other components once you've loaded this one because you know what else is coming?
In this scenario, I go to the home page, and then let's say I'm in the home app and I'm going to try to go to the checkout app.
Yeah.
I don't want to refresh the page and go to a different app. I want to federate in their page. What I do is inside of pages, I just have this slug, which literally is just spits out the federated catch-all. And that catch-all is going to have this root matcher in it. So what I start with is this export. I have some get initial props to do whatever I want, figure out like the base layer while I'm pulling in federation here. But then what I can end up doing is I go down to the initial props. I pretty much match the page. I say, here are the remotes. Here's the path of the URL you're on. And then what it does is it goes, okay, let me find all the remotes on the page, get their page maps, and then we go through the little page config that it gives us like a path and the name of a remote that we want. And what it will end up returning is whatever the match is. So I'll end up with basically pdp/star, and then the value of it would be pdp.js. And then I know, okay, that's the page that you're asking for based on this route. And I can pull in that page from whoever owns it. And I don't have to know what remote does this come from, or how do I know if this exists or not. I can just say, let me do like a service discovery, find all the hash maps, combine them all together, and now have every app that's on the page or that's loaded, I have all the root configurations, and I can figure out who owns the /checkout route. Because as routes get more and more complicated, you won't necessarily know who owns what or where everything is. You'd want a way to just crawl the front end and figure out, hey, who owns this thing, or what am I supposed to do when I get here? And you could just have this kind of catch-all mechanism where you go, I don't know what to do. Ask all the remotes and perform some logic on the kind of aggregated result. In my case, it's figure out who owns this path. If you can't figure out who owns the path, just refresh the page to the current path in case somebody forgot to export a route map or something like that. That's my use case for it. But we do the same thing for Sentry. If we want to load a federated module and I also want Sentry logging to be wrapped around it, I do the same thing where I have a function called federate component. And in the federate component, you put in the remote that's coming from and the component that you want. And then I just use the window API underneath it. But before I actually perform the factory execution and return the module you're after, I also do a window.get the current remote /Sentry and see if a Sentry remote exists. If that Sentry remote does exist, I execute it. And what it does is it just adds something to Sentry Hub. So it registers that origins remote Sentry on your current application. If it throws an error, I can go window.sentrihub.checkout capture exception, and I can forward any errors that the consuming app gets back to the app that provided this function that's going wrong.
I was a little confused there, but I think I understand. Sentry is the logging when you have an error.
Yeah.
Okay, it's a
Yeah.
service that you're talking about. Okay. Okay, so you're able to use a service to log the errors when you go to a certain route, because that route is technically another application. It's able to figure out what is broken on there.
It goes even deeper than that because, yeah, the route's another application. So one, I wanted around that. But two, what happens if I pull in a component that's bad? I want to make sure that, hey, if the component fails in the home page, I don't want to notify the team that owns the home page. I want to notify the team that owns the component that failed, because the team that's consuming it can't do much. They pass it props, and if it stops working, I don't want all the errors to get captured, and usually Sentry just captures them on the current single page app. So if the homepage team is getting an error about the checkout button, they can't do anything to fix it, and the checkout team would never know about it. So when you federate in the checkout button, I would want to pull in that Sentry, their Sentry global, attach it to a Sentry hub, and then inside of checkout, whenever they are using capture exception, Webpack, we alias it to like basically window.sentryhub.current host. And current host is known at the time. So the capture exception function ends up being window.checkout.capture exception, or window.sentryhub.checkout and capture exception from it. As the thing throws errors, it's automatically able to throw them back through the hub to the right user. But the only way to actually get the logging for the component you're about to consume on the page is through some kind of discovery mechanism. While I'm downloading the chunk from another team, also go and register their Sentry chunk onto the page through federation as well.
I see. It's two different federated modules here that are going on. One is I have to load this page because this page requires this module. I'm going to go download that. But at the same time, if an error occurs, I need to know where to put that error. So I'm also going to load an associated chunk. It's a different one that includes where to log those error messages.
Yeah. If you look at this example, this is our server-side rendering solution for Next.js. It's only available by workshops only. I can give you a quick example because it has the best one. Here's Sentry, and I just have like a Sentry.js file, and it's just this piece of code. And then if I look inside of app, you should see it just import. So app just imports Sentry. It's imported down here, and then if I look in the next config, you'll see I also expose Sentry up here, along with the page map, so that
every
I can figure
app
out
is doing
routing.
this.
Yeah, so every app exposes a page map and exposes Sentry.
Mhm.
And then what it lets me do is inside of, I just have a generic index shared thing here because all these are in a monorepo. So inside of this, I pretty much have like my fetch mechanism to go and get this through server-side render and fetch. Or if I look up Sentry in here, what I'll end up doing is inside of this call to the component. So I go, I initialize the sharing myself. I check out if the remote exists or not. And then I will set up share scope. So do some things that Webpack would usually do inside of its factory. And then I will go, okay, cool. Once you have everything set up, try and download Sentry and register it, which gets that federated Sentry function. And then if I can get it, awesome. If not, doesn't matter. And then move on and actually get the module the user requested. Now, if it throws an error, I know that anything that throws is going to get swallowed back up to the right Sentry one, because everybody uses this federate Sentry wrapper when they're initializing their applications. And so what that ends up having is federate Sentry, which registers it to the hub. Now I can get it off of there. And then when you're using capture exception, we use an abstraction on it. So now we know hub.host capture exception. Now, when everybody's doing this, the host is transpiled back to whatever it is at build time. So if it's checkout, it's that automatically. I could just capture exception anywhere in the checkout app, and I know that it's going to send it back to the correct Sentry hub and report it to the right team. I needed a way to do, I just call it service discovery for lack of a better name. But inside of here, we need a way to do service discovery to figure out a couple things. One of them being, I need to figure out where the Sentry is or something that might not necessarily be known. Or if I need a route somewhere, I need to do the same thing because I don't have a NPM package that has every route in the app. and I don't have an app shell like React Router would or something like that where I just store all of them. But these are Next.js pages. If Next is going to 404 in one app, instead of showing the 404 page immediately, I'm going to go through and go, cool, walk through all the remotes, get all of their pages, and return me a root object, and then see if we can do a pattern match on it and figure out, does this page exist anywhere within Federation's knowledge? If so, pull in the page from whoever that host is, and it doesn't know anything about it. It doesn't know the root configs. It doesn't know anything. It doesn't even know who the remote is. It just knows, here's all the remotes on the page, so let me aggregate all the roots from every other application and then pass it to a root matcher, and it'll tell me, cool, it needs to come from home, and it's slash, whatever the module is, and does it all automatically.
How would you get into a situation where you're getting a 404 and you don't want to display the 404 yet, but there's some other module somewhere that actually should be displaying content there?
That would be the case of just like how Next's catch-all works. If I look at pages,
This is something built into Next.js?
well, in this case, like the page root is something like this pattern is built into Next. I've got /C for category, /P for products. But then if I wanted to go to /checkout and I'm sitting on this app, there's no checkout page or checkout root.
Yeah.
It'll end up throwing a 404 by default. What you can do is, this is called like a catch-all. Basically, if nothing matches, go to this. So inside of here, I go, okay, this is going to be, if no root matches, it goes to this.
Yeah.
And inside of here, I can go, okay, check if it matches in Federation. Otherwise, do something else. Render a 404 or do whatever I want in here, because this is now the ultimate page matcher. If it doesn't match anything in here, it's going to point it to the slug, because that's how the URL is designed. And then the slug's going to render some result. Then it's up to me to determine, is this valid? Do I want to federate another page in, or do I actually just want to return the 404 page? And in the case with Next, because if somebody forgets to export something on their page map like that, then the root could exist, but you could 404 it. What I'll end up doing is I go, cool, if you can't figure out the root, just refresh the current root. And then it can go back up through your CDN, and it can bounce it to, say, a different Lambda and see if, like, your edge network knows what path this thing belongs to. Let's say I didn't export this out, but I had another one that was like /B, and it goes there, but I don't have this in the root map. So the page still exists, and Akamai or my ingress might know what to do with it, but just because it's not exposed in here, it would technically 404. What I'll do is go, okay, if I can't figure out who you belong to, then I'm just going to reload the page, which would have whatever.com/B in it, and that would bounce me into the correct app that responds, like the correct Lambda that looks after this part of the page map, and then I would get a server-side render of this result, and the user would still get the page. They just wouldn't get it federated. Or it would 404 from like our Akamai origin or whatever. But pretty much, I don't want to trust that it doesn't exist. I'd rather refresh the page on the current root and see if anybody knows what to do with this /B* path, and not trust that somebody put it in their page map. If the CDN can route to it, then perfect. We'll get an SSR one. We can throw some kind of warning that, hey, the page reloaded because it didn't know what to do. You're missing a exposed root in your page map, something like that. But it's a surefire way that if anything goes wrong, just reload the page, and another Next.js instance, whoever owns that page, can actually do this SSR for it. You would switch back from doing a client-side render to a server-side.
Okay, I understand now.
It's kind of separation of concerns.
Yeah, because this particular application does not care about those routes, but they do exist because other applications do care about them. And so using module federation, you're able to pull in the different chunks and the page maps dynamically without having them in your app. And if that app was deployed with those routes in it, then now they exist, and you're able to know that because you're able to load that app in to find out.
Yeah, I'm able to load these files in, put them all together, and then perform a pattern match, which is like, current URL doesn't match any of these keys. If it does, give me the value, and I know the name of the remote, and then it'll return like, hey, here's your match. It's shop/CDP. And now I know what remote to load.
The ./CDP is the remote.
Yeah, that's the name of the remote module. And shop is the name of the host, or the name of like where it's coming from. It'd be window.shop.get CDP. And that's how I would know like where to get this remote from, is because inside of that root matcher, I can figure out, okay, here's who owns it, and here's the one that you want. Because you need to figure out two things. If the URL is /checkout or /mybag or /cart, I need to know, one, it's owned by the remote called checkout, And two, I need to know which page they need. There's two pieces of dynamic logic you need to figure out. One, what window object do I even ask for this remote component from? And two, once I know what window object to ask for it from, what am I actually asking for? So you have to figure out two pieces. So if you have 6 remotes, how do you know which of the 6 has the page you want?
That makes sense. Dude, this was incredible. I think that's really
Yeah, sure.
interesting. You're definitely doing some high level stuff. Some of this I've done myself with the Scout app, but you're at a different level than me. It's crazy. I'm not even close to this.
It's taken us 8 months to conjure up that reference architecture. Was 8 months worth of work.
Oh my
me
God.
and me and Jacob poured over getting that to work. It's the luxury of time and the luxury of knowing all this stuff from the get-go has helped, but it definitely takes time to figure out the patterns. Like the most useful pattern has been this discovery mechanism where, and I mean, even you and me talked about it back in the day where I was like, can't you just call all the remotes and ask them for some specific thing?
Yeah,
like
that's what I had. Yeah.
/start?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so pretty much like we revived that kind of idea and we use it for Sentry logs to automatically register Sentry whenever you're pulling in a remote from somewhere else. So the logs always go back to the owner. And then we did it on the page map as well because it was the only way to decentralize who owns the router. Otherwise, everybody has to npm publish something and it still would be like this kind of catch-all router that everybody would have every like switch statement of every possible app. So instead, we were like, what if everybody just publishes it, and then on the fly, we go and call all the remotes and attempt to resolve where it goes. But yeah, it's been useful. It's been definitely useful.
Yeah, that's incredible. There's so much stuff here. This was actually a clip from a different video, so this is the end of it here. I'm hoping you guys had a great time listening to this advanced usage of module federation and how you can take something in a completely different direction than I've ever thought it could go.